I'm Jean Flegel. I'm the spine orthopedic nurse practitioner here at Skyridge Medical Center. We're so happy that you've joined us here today, whether it's in class or on video. Let's get started. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the spine to start out with. This is your pelvis, this is your head, this is the front of your spine, this is the back. When you rub your hand up and down your back, that's what you feel, all those bumpy parts. Okay? You're probably familiar with these bony parts. This is called the vertebrae. There's the front of the vertebrae, and then there's the back of the vertebrae. And in between the front and the back, that's where your spinal cord runs. Okay? Runs down to about level L2. And I'll tell you how we count this in just a minute. After that, it's just a series of nerve roots coming out on both sides, as you can see, and as you probably saw in the pictures in your book. Okay? So you have to note that even when the spinal cord finishes at L2, there's just this bunch of nerve roots coming out. It's called the cauda equina, or horse's tail. In between these bony sections are what we call discs. They're sort of like jelly donuts. Those are kind of your shock absorbers, if you will. Okay. As we get older, as we have wear and tear on our discs and so forth, we get what's called degenerative disc disease, another nice way of saying arthritis. Or sometimes we have a fracture there. When we do have arthritis, sometimes our bone tries to repair itself. And what happens if we have little bony projections that come out and they'll hit this nerve root? But for most of us, what we have is called degenerative disc disease. And these discs are sort of like jelly donuts. In this particular model, you can see here where the jelly is sort of squirted out, or it's like a herniated disc. And you can see it's impinging on this nerve root. But as I mentioned, and some of you may have identified on your MRI, your doctor may have said, oh, your disc is like a pancake, where it's very, very dark. It's lost its water content. So what happens when we have degenerative disc disease, or it loses its water content, is it kind of pushes down against each other. So all of a sudden we have bone rubbing against bone, and we have an impingement on the nerve root. Now the pictures of that are pretty much identified on page 7. You can see a cross section here of the vertebral body. You can see this little hole right in the back here, and that is where the spinal cord runs. Right below that is just a kind of a picture of that jelly donut, that disc, and some pictures below of a herniated disc and a ruptured disc where that jelly squirts out, because now this is kind of dried out and cracked, and it's given an opportunity for that jelly to squirt out. And you can see the nerve roots exiting up here on this particular note here in the book. Okay. So as I mentioned, now this model does not have any nerve sticking out, but if my pen were a nerve and I had it coming out right here, you can see that if all of a sudden, if I had degenerative disc disease, and now this is squished together, it would cause impingement on this nerve root. The nerve roots are very important for what we're talking about here, because what happens is when you have degenerative disc disease, when the water content is lost, or maybe you have some bony spurs that are pushing out against a nerve root, and you have bone rubbing against bone, you've got impingement upon that nerve root. If you have any kind of curvature in the spine, like scoliosis, or something that isn't quite aligned up, maybe you have one vertebrae shooting out against the top one or the next one, you're going to have impingement upon these nerve roots. If you have some kind of fracture, your spine is not going to be stable. And once again, it may affect the nerve root. What happens with this then is, because the nerve root innervates lower parts of our body as we go down to the lumbar area and so forth, is that it's going to affect you in one or two, and probably both ways. And I'm sure you can all relate to this. Okay? One is sensory, and that's going to be numbness, tingling, or pain. So you have impingement on the nerve root, you're going to have numbness, tingling, or pain, and I bet you all of you have probably experienced that. You probably all are now, right? Or you can have a problem with motor. And what that means is that all of a sudden your reflexes aren't quite as strong as they used to be. Or you're not able to pick up your feet and walk like you once did. Okay? But it's kind of confusing to some people, and this is why, even though this writing is small, on page 8, you can see the nerve roots innervate different parts of your body. So as in the picture where this person has L4, L5 symptoms, you can see how that L4, L5 nerve root kind of affects then the lower part